welcome to the Clean Energy Show. I'm Brian Stockton.
And once again, I'm James Whittingham. How are you, Brian?
I'm great. How are you?
Well, don't ask. My bowels are fine, if that's what you're wondering. They're just fine.
I wasn't wondering.
Okay.
So last week, we kind of had a cliffhanger episode, with the radon meter.
Yes.
And so
our first cliffhanger episode.
Yeah, so I'm dying to know what that's about, but I thought
Literally.
we should have a kind of an episode recap from last time.
Sure.
And like ideally it would be, previously on the Clean Energy Show, and then we would edit clips from last week. But that would take too much time. So I think that we should do that, but just sort of, improvise some clips from last week.
Okay.
Okay?
Holy crap. Okay,
here we go. Previously on the Clean Energy Show. So, James, I've got this radon meter here in the bomb shelter. What is it reading?
What's a dangerous level?
200 is a dangerous level.
Okay, well, I'm going to look at the radon meter now here in the bomb shelter where we record our podcast.
Mm-hmm.
205.
Oh, no, that's terrible.
Why are you trying to kill me?
I'm trying to kill you. But, James, I would like to loan you this radon meter so you can test the levels in your house, your innovative passive solar house.
Well, I'm a little bit worried, Brian, because I've never had it tested.
Right, and it's got a dirt floor kind of crawl space. There's no basement.
There's no basement.
There's a dirt floor crawl space, and that could be bad for radon.
And it's not, I've had contractors tell me you should throw sand on top of it and vapor seal it. Okay. And to keep the radon out and mold and anything else. My first floor is a living room, a kitchen, dining room.
Okay, wait, are we still doing the recap?
Yeah, no, that was last week. You go back to the episode. Okay. And it was boring then, too. I'm just saying, we spend some time downstairs, but a lot of it, the bulk of it is upstairs.
Right.
Where the bedrooms are.
Okay, I think that brings us up to date. So here we are in the present again.
Okay.
For this week's episode.
Uh-huh.
So, James, where did you put your radon meter in your house?
None of your damn business. I put it on my kitchen table.
Okay.
In the dining room, which is in the center, the geographic center of our downstairs, our main floor. Our lowest floor.
Yeah, which is the ground level.
Right.
Okay.
Just above the crawl space, which no one goes into.
Yeah.
My wife said, put the radon detector into the crawl space. Why? To see if some living organism down there is getting irradiated?
Yeah.
Well, that could be important for monster movies, but no.
It could help to keep out, varmints.
Sure.
That they're all going to get cancer if they move into your house.
Two-headed mouse comes up one day. I don't know. So we put it on the kitchen table, and you said that I would get a reading in 6 hours.
Yeah.
Did not.
Okay.
Concerned me.
I was lying. I don't know.
I thought, is this getting irradiated? Is the machine broken? Because
I was just guessing. I didn't remember really.
It was almost 24 hours before a number popped
really?
up.
Okay.
And again, 200 is concerning. Mm-hmm. We were here like 205, 206 here in the bomb shelter last week. Mm-hmm. Brian is growing a second head on his shoulder.
Absolutely.
And it looks somewhat foreign. I don't know. It's a different ethnicity than your first head. Anyway, the number is, are you ready?
I'm ready.
I have to remember now. 56.
Oh, that's fantastic.
And shocking.
That's great.
And shocking.
Okay, well, that's great.
Now, there's a short-term number as well as a long-term.
Yeah, and really you're supposed to leave it there for 3 or 4 weeks, I think, to really know for sure.
And it has fluctuated a little bit. It has, and I can't really determine when it fluctuates. I've tried to, normally I do keep the windows open, or a window open, especially on sunny days, because the house heats up enough and I like my fresh air.
But if you're trying to measure radon, you should really have the windows closed.
And I did, and I kept the house sealed, and I turned off the furnace to not circulate air, and then I had the furnace on, and it seems, and I could be wrong, but it seems like it's diluted when the furnace is running. Because you got 2 floors of the house, so maybe you're spreading it out.
You're circulating the air.
I have come down in the morning, and the short term has been around 76. But either way, I dodged a bullet, literally, because we live in Regina, Saskatchewan, and apparently and the very day I got the detector, there was a news story about it saying,
we're all going to die.
We're all going to die because one in 3 houses or something?
Is that right? Too high?
It was really really ridiculous. Like, if you consider that it's impossible to detect without spending $40-50 on a test kit.
Yeah.
Nobody knows. And I just assumed, I was always planning on doing it. And then, you have to do it in the wintertime when your doors are closed and over a 3-month period, usually the test kits are. And I didn't have money at some points in my life that I didn't want to spend on it. And and then I thought, well, what if it's high? I don't have the money to mitigate it. So I feel like we were very lucky, because if it's 1 in 3, and I've heard 1 in 5 for Saskatchewan, southern Saskatchewan as a whole, the province, but 1 in 3, because there's uranium here. We actually mine uranium, so there is not anywhere near here, I don't think, but it's way up north. But there is uranium around here decaying in the ground, and that's what causes the radon.
So and there was the fact that you have this dirt crawl space instead of a basement. That seemed like it could be worse than a regular house. It worried me,
but I did renovate the house on the first floor. I put in a vapor barrier on the first floor.
Oh, yeah.
Just because I put on a sort of a fake hardwood, whatever you call it. It's been so long since I renovated it.
Laminate flooring.
And they said you should do that over a cold space so it prevents condensation, and you don't want the wood to take in any moisture whatsoever.
And did you put insulation as well?
It comes with a tiny bit of insulation.
Oh, okay, yeah.
It's like an R2 or something.
Right.
It's like just a red, bubbly vapor film that also provides a bit of a cushion on the floor as well. So it's not, I couldn't put in any insulation. The crawl space is insulated for what it's worth.
Oh, okay. Yeah, our house is, I don't know, we've upgraded the insulation in kind of half the house, like the, home theater room here next door. We've got now some insulation in the floor, and we spray foam the walls.
How'd you put insulation on the floor?
Well, we were just putting in a new carpet, so we just put like a half an inch of that hard, what is that called, styrofoam type insulation.
Really? Under the carpet? You can do that?
Yeah, so insulation first, then plywood, and then carpet.
Oh, insulation, plywood, and the carpet. That's interesting.
Yeah.
And do you feel warmer now?
Oh, yeah, it's such an improvement. And the fact that the walls have been spray foamed, we redid all the drywall, and it's way cozier in there. The other rooms in the basement are not as nice.
Yeah, I mean, that's one thing. My only 2 houses that I've owned have not had basements, and partially because for financial reasons that I got the houses cheaper in a market that was blowing up. But I also feel like, basements are kind of cold and problematic sometimes. And
in our part of the world, they're problematic because of the radon that we discussed, and also the shifting soil. We have clay soil in our city, and so everybody's basement tends to shift and crack. And
so clay absorbs water and expands or something, right?
Yeah, it expands and then contracts, and so all of our houses are constantly shifting.
Yeah, so it's almost... there's parts of the world in the southern states, they don't have basements there.
Yeah, and we probably shouldn't have basements here.
I think the reason we have them is because our frost line is so low, it's 4 feet or something, that if you're going down 4 feet, you might as well go down 8 feet. So the early homes had like an 8-foot ceiling. People were shorter. Now our generation is a bit taller, and it's not working out.
Yeah, I did have an item here kind of later on the list really about home heating, and that's one of the next frontiers really in clean energy is, especially here in a cold country like Canada, everybody's burning natural gas to heat our homes. So that's going to be the next frontier. It sort of seems like electric vehicles are kind of next on the list, but eventually we're all going to have to get off natural gas to heat our homes. So it's going to mean, upgrading insulation typically, more solar panels. Electrical heating is the only type of heating for your house that can be potentially zero carbon. Potentially, but we're just going to need more solar panels, more green
But
energy.
You have to ask yourself where we are, where there is no great effort to green the grid.
Yeah.
Although they did talk about sending a line yesterday to Manitoba. Did you hear about that?
No, so Manitoba makes lots of hydroelectric power.
Yes. In fact, they're like 99% or something.
Something like
it's
that.
Ridiculous.
Yeah, it's ridiculous.
And they have extra to share with us, so they'll connect our grids. Just like Europe is doing, they're interconnecting the different regions in Europe, because that's kind of necessary if you're going to have excess. Like I know California wasted a whole bunch of solar last summer, a ridiculous amount of solar.
Yeah, and a certain amount of that sharing, I think, goes on already. But more of that is in the future as the grid gets smarter.
And I remember Hillary Clinton's campaign when she ran against Obama in 2008, that she was talking about smart grids. It was all, of course, hot air. Nobody was doing a damn thing about it.
Mm-hmm.
But yeah, they knew back then, and that's what we need to do. But the grids are all different companies. It's not a nationalized thing or anything. So you have in the States different companies and multiple companies sometimes in one state.
Yeah.
And it's difficult to do when you're a for-profit. But ours is government run, and they're not doing a darn thing about it.
Yeah, they have a monopoly in our province for power generation. And so they have the potential to have a complete control over what they do and how they expand and how they smarten up the grid. But we're not seeing a lot of progress.
And the reason is the oil industry is king here. Fossil fuels.
They're right now building a new natural gas power plant near us, spending $750 million on it, and seems crazy to be building new fossil infrastructure in the year 2020.
Yes, and it will be financially not viable.
Yeah.
It already is not financially viable in some places in North America to do that because it's cheaper to do green, and they're not doing it. So, yeah.
But yeah, I wanted to talk to you about that. So greening our houses is kind of the topic here, and I would love to get rid of our natural gas furnace here in my house, but it's just cost prohibitive. And the first step really would be to upgrade the insulation for the whole house.
How would you do that?
I would do more spray foam. Like here in the bomb shelter, the exterior walls are actually spray foam, so there's decent insulation in here. But like I say, only about half the house has been done, but we've got upgraded windows. But, it would take more insulation and then more solar panels to create enough.
Which would go where?
Well, that's the problem. I'm kind of running out of roof space. So,
do you have more roof space? I didn't know you had any roof space left.
Yeah, well, I could still put some panels facing east, and I could still put panels facing north. North. And that sounds crazy, but you can have solar panels facing north.
I proposed that idea to my solar installer, and he got angry. He was not happy with me proposing that because I have this odd roof where like a quarter of it faces due south, and it works well because it melts fast, right? And then I've got this huge roof that faces north. It's massive. It's 4 times as big, and I had read that some people were doing north panels, and I asked about it, and he got angry. Like he said, I'm out. I'm not even going to do yours home if you're going to talk that way.
Okay, here's the thing, but it does depend on the type of roof that you have because our house is a low slope roof.
Yes.
So any panels we put on the roof, because the angle is so low, they're all mostly just pointing up. So yes, the north facing ones would generate less power, but it's because of the angle, they're still pointing up. And in fact, the north side of my roof even gets direct sunlight at some times of the year when the days are quite long in the summer.
Did you model that with the computer online or anything?
No, we never did because we were kind of at our maximum budget. Like we didn't want to spend any more. But we would go east facing first because I probably got room for another 10 panels facing east.
That's a lot.
Yeah.
10 panels?
Yeah, I think so. About
Jesus, you got real estate galore. You don't need to go north.
It's a fairly large roof on our house, yeah.
Yes, with the bomb shelter and everything.
It's a bungalow that's quite spread out, so the roof area is quite large. But yeah, we would need to go north side, I think, to generate enough electricity to convert to electric heat.
And that is the big challenge in Canada because it's so expensive and because does it even work, I ask? You're an expert, as far as I'm concerned, in heat pumps. Like, what happens when it's like what's the limit on heat pumps for temperature? There's
ground source heat pumps and then there's air source heat pumps.
So you kind of have to go ground source.
Ground source would be the best. The air source heat pumps will work to about minus 20 Celsius. So actually air source heat pumps will work in our climate like 95% of the time.
And I've read that they don't heat up like a furnace does, that you have to wait on them.
I think so, yeah. And I don't really understand how they work, but they're just taking the difference in temperature and compressing it and amplifying it. So it's a more efficient way to heat with electricity. Like electric baseboards heat really quickly, but they're very inefficient. They use tons of power.
Right.
So air source or ground source heat pumps just do the same thing, heating with electricity, but just more efficiently.
Well, 10 to 15 years ago, we had programs in Canada to upgrade the efficiency of furnaces because high-efficiency furnaces came about, and everyone, including myself, got one. And I got a grant that I think fully covered it somehow.
Yeah, we cut our gas bill about in half when we switched to...
Is that right? Your overall gas bill?
Yeah, well, the house actually came with 2 furnaces. It was so inefficient.
Wow.
There was one for upstairs and one for the basement. So we replaced those 2 with one high-efficiency furnace, and our gas bill about cut in half.
Well, so you've paid for that, even if you didn't get a grant.
Yeah, but the thing that kills me though is that the furnace had a 10-year warranty, and 10 years and 3 months into owning it, the motor went.
Really?
And it cost like $1,200.
Really?
Yeah. So.
Oh, I was so miffed because of when I put my furnace in, they said if you register online, you get your warranty goes from 5 years to 10 years, and I never got that done because it rejected me. The system wasn't working or something.
Oh, weird.
And then I, of course, gave up, as I have to do after a month or so. And I thought, oh darn, I'm missing out on my 10-year warranty, but it has lasted 10 years, and so I'm fortunately okay. I should probably get it serviced. Anyway, there's just not much you can do in Canada it would be enormously expensive for everybody to convert. I mean, you couldn't even have a program. If you can, it was like $3,000 for a furnace, right? And you could get the furnace in for $3,000, but the heat pump is a big different story.
My estimate would be about $50,000 if I wanted to get rid of my gas furnace.
Didn't you get a ground source heat pump estimate for $20,000?
Yeah, when I first moved into the house like a dozen years ago, we got a quote on a ground source heat pump, and I think it was about $30,000 for the whole system. Yeah, so, but it even it would still use a lot of electricity, so you'd still want more solar panels. So say $30,000 for the heat pump, and another $20,000 worth of solar.
Really?
$50,000, maybe put in some insulation. Oh. I mean, eventually, solar is going to be so ubiquitous and cheap, we're not even going to need to upgrade the insulation really in our houses. Like if we're producing tons of free electricity from the sun, you won't necessarily have to worry about the insulation value.
And one of the things that this show is about is sort of that race, because we are in a race to meet climate targets and the Paris Agreement and all that. And we are watching on this show with popcorn in hand how the world is changing and how technology and prices are coming down. But is it fast enough? And people like Elon Musk are advancing the electrification of transportation and things like that. And solar is coming down in price, and there's been only incremental technological improvements in batteries and solar. But it does keep improving. It does keep dropping in money.
And in terms of Canada, my understanding is that the transportation industry creates less carbon than home heating does. Like home heating is really the thing that, more greenhouse gases.
The cheapest way to improve home heating, but not to solve it, is to improve insulation and draft proofing and things.
Yeah, and then when we initially got that ground source heat pump quote, the guy said, well, if you're going to do this, spend $30,000 on the heat pump, you really should do your insulation first.
Right.
And that's kind of what stopped us from doing it, because we thought, okay, well, it's, just getting too expensive.
Do you think that that's come down in price at all? Solar's come down, sort of the installation of solar?
Ground source heat pumps, probably not, because there's just so much labor involved in digging gigantic...
The heat pump itself has probably come down and become more efficient.
Yeah, probably. But yeah, solar's definitely getting cheaper. I think, wind turbines are getting cheaper. Battery storage for the grid is getting cheaper.
Right.
So it's all coming.
Well, Brian, we've had a call.
Yeah.
A feedback, which means one thing, that somebody is listening to us.
What?
At least one person.
What?
Who's not a robot, not a Russian bot. There are lots of Russian bots listening to us. I don't know why.
Yeah.
Lots of people listening. One person. Let's go to what he has to say.
Okay, so it's kind of like a call.
Sure.
Hi, Brian and James. It's Bruce Murray calling from the eastern tip of Canada. And I just wanted to let you know that I guess you have at least 2 listeners, me and Brian's dog, I guess. But I just had a couple of questions, a couple of comments. The first is the name of the show is the Clean Energy Show. I know the first episode was mostly on electric vehicles, but does that mean you're also going to cover topics of wind and solar and other areas of clean energy as well? My neighbor actually just bought an electric vehicle, a Kia Soul. He imported it from Quebec. There's actually a company here in Nova Scotia that imports them from Quebec because they're much cheaper to resell here than to try and source one locally. And he loves it. He's got about a 40-kilometer round trip to work, put a charger in his house, and he's happy as anything. They've installed a network around Nova Scotia. I think there's an EV charger every 50 kilometers along the major highways in Nova Scotia at this point. And I've seen several of the big Tesla supercharger stations where they've got like 16 chargers in a row at some of the major gas stops along the way. I will tell anyone who listens to go and watch the documentary Who Killed the Electric Car? And I'd love to hear your thoughts on that film and some of the topics that are in it. I really believe that EV technology and battery technology would be at least 20 years more advanced than it is now if it wasn't for big oil and big auto and big government all conspiring to hold it back. So I'd love to hear your thoughts on that film. And also just to let you know that I'm calling from a fallout shelter here in Nova Scotia. So if the apocalypse does happen, you'll still have at least one listener for the next 10 years. Anyway, great to hear your voice again, James. Great to meet you, Brian, and I'm subscribed, so I'll be listening.
Well, thank you. That was Bruce Murray in Nova Scotia. And if you would like to send us a message via text or voice, or however you want to do it, you can send a message to the Clean Energy Show, cleanenergyshow@gmail.com, or on Twitter, Clean Energy Show as well. We'd love to hear from you. All podcasts need feedback. We thrive on feedback, good or bad. We want to know what people think and how we can improve the show. And topics of discussion are wonderful, aren't they? So what do you have to say about what Bruce said?
Lots of great stuff there. Who Killed the Electric Car? Yeah, it's a really interesting documentary about, the death, I guess, of the electric car. But I actually kind of prefer the sequel, which is Revenge of the Electric Car, because it starts to show like the beginnings of Tesla. And that film's getting to be a bit old now. Like, is that maybe 10 years ago that came out?
2011, I think. We just showed it at the library here.
And Who Killed the Electric Car, even older than that. But both films I think are interesting.
So the first film sort of gets you angry because EVs. California had a policy that sort of forced maybe ahead of their time, for cars to come out. And General Motors made a bizarre little EV1, and everyone loved it. Like Danny DeVito and all the celebrities were driving them. This is pre-Prius even. And anyone who was eco celebrities were all driving these. They loved them. They were fast, but the range was small. And then after the 3-year lease ended, General Motors crushed them, which angered a lot of people.
Yeah, there was a story recently. Apparently, Francis Ford Coppola owned one, and he
did not give it back.
He didn't give it back. He heard that they were coming for it, and so he hid it away and pretended he didn't know where it was.
Because he's Francis Ford Coppola. I'm very busy. I don't know where it is. Sorry. I'd love to do that. I disagree, Bruce, on the 20-year timeline. I think that the technology in batteries needed to improve, and that is a slow. That's a slow thing.
Maybe 10 years, maybe not 20, but
I would agree. I would say maybe at the best case scenario, if there was really tough environmental regulations and they stuck up and everybody had to make an EV in 1998 or whenever this was, that would happen. And the Revenge of the Electric Car, which is a sequel, and by the way, it's on YouTube for free. Somebody, I think after they get all the play they can out of it, they just put it up on YouTube. So it's there on YouTube for you to watch. It is really showing the dawn of the electrification of transportation, the movement of my car, the the now imprisoned Carlos Ghosn was making the EV for Nissan, which is I own and love, and it was a gamble. And there was Elon Musk trying to make his first sports car. Was it the sports car or was it the S?
I believe it's the Roadster, maybe just the beginnings of the Model S, yeah.
So he's in there struggling. Everybody's struggling. There's a guy who custom does cars, and his shop burns down, and it's tragic. And then there's the General Motors is coming out with the Volt with a V, not to be confused with the Bolt, which is currently on the market. And the Volt was sort of a hybrid, but it worked very well because it was an electric car, and then for quite a ways, like 80 kilometers or something, a usable amount in any city, and then the gas engine would kick in as a backup, and you could. Back then there was no place to charge, so there's that, Bruce, and. Yes, we are talking about wind and solar, Brian. Obviously, that's a deal. It's less sexy than cars.
Yeah, for whatever reason, cars are, maybe more fun than solar panels. But
I mean, there's not like the new model of the Model Y solar panels coming out, and it's got a hatch on it, and the solar panels are solar panels. And I will talk about some today a little bit too. Yeah,
and they tend to improve in small increments. I mean, I guess electric cars do too, but every year the efficiency of solar panels kind of increases by 1 or 2%. So, it's always improving.
In electric cars, your battery cost is going down. I saw something that said that this is a bit of an aside, that the Tesla battery they priced it out at $15,000 for.
Yeah, the cost of the battery within the car, yeah.
And they're saying that the new battery technology would be a double-digit increase in density and cost. So that is like guessed at 10 to 20%. So if you take 10 to 20% off of $15,000, it's not that much. So my takeaway from that was Teslas are very expensive. Yeah. It's not just the battery. Yeah. It's because we are waiting for battery costs to come down so we reach a parity with internal combustion cars, but $15,000 US of a $45,000 car US is not half. It used to be half, and now it's less. So I don't know where the price improvements are going to come. That's what I'm anxious about.
Yeah, it probably has to do with what you mentioned last week. There's like 100 factories proposed in the news, and a lot of those building batteries. So
they can't build them fast enough. And some people are experiencing shortages. Audi admitted to a shortage, and
Hyundai's had shortages. It's a real problem.
And Tesla is the only one who doesn't seem to have shortages. Although I have to wonder if they had the capacity they wanted, they'd probably be deploying a lot more grid storage.
Yeah, because they not only have to feed their cars, but they've got to feed their grid storage solutions and their home storage solutions too, because you can buy batteries for your home as well.
Right. So wind and solar is definitely something we're going to talk about as it comes up. And
actually, I wanted to ask you, because I know you had a spectacular February for your solar panels.
Thank you for pointing that out.
Yeah, because February is not typically a good month for solar power where we live, because the days are short, the sun is low, they're often covered with snow. So, normally your February isn't great for solar, but
it's not great, but it's not bad either. As far as the solar heating in the house, it really takes off in late January. I say the third week of January, which is a month after the solstice, that the heating of the house is at its prime around then, because the sun angle is very sweet in February.
Yes.
As far as the solar goes, though, last year was my first February, and I think it snowed on like the second day. So I had one day of sun. I had a pretty good January, and the snow was melting. And so the whole month was covered because it was a very cold month, and that's where I made a video of starting my electric car at minus 40, or 42 even. So the lack of melting, and it does fluctuate here. It always has fluctuated. There's always been above zero stuff, and last year I recorded it melting at minus 17 on a calm day. That the roof sort of built up if it was calm and the air that was warm stayed there and the roof was allowed to heat up, that it melted away starting at minus 17 at solar noon, which is 1 o'clock here.
Wow.
So, but that doesn't always happen. But it can happen even in February. Anyway, I was lucky that it blew off. I have a very high house, as I've said in the last show. I won't go to a clip that we reenact, but I do have a high roof and it blows off and it's kind of out in the open. So there's a field on one side and a 4-lane boulevard on the other near the edge of the city. And the roof is virtually 3 stories high and nobody else's house is. So it gets blown off well. And it's always windy here, almost always windy, especially when it snows.
So how much power do you generate in a year? Do you know what your figure is for the year?
I do not. It's a 3.3 kilowatt system.
So it's a smaller system. So mine's about an 8.6 kilowatt system, and I'm making about 8 megawatt hours a year, which is about what we use in the house.
Is that right?
Yeah.
Well, I'd have to look up my figures. Stand by.
Stand by.
All right, I have the figures now. It is 4.16 megawatt hours I made last year in the calendar year 2019.
Oh, that's great. That's not bad.
The 3.3 kilowatt system.
Yeah, so your system, it's better at producing power throughout the year. Mine is more weighted to the summer because, like I say, the low slope roof, our summer production is crazy. It's through the roof.
And generally, you do it for the summer. You size it, you angle it if you can you want to make the most out of the summer on a net metering basis. A lot of people don't realize you're not using the solar power. It's about how much you make in a year. So,
right.
And they know how cloudy it is. Like, for instance, my solar projections when they did the install said that June would be low, that May and July would be higher, and it's worked out exactly right. Because of weather, they know that the weather patterns call for a lot more clouds in June here.
I was actually wondering that because, I noticed my June numbers are lower than I thought they would be.
That was projected and predicted in the 40 years of climate data that they used to work with our house. By the way, our solar installer went out of business.
Well, it's a long story, but yes, the regulations have changed here and it's no longer conducive to putting solar on your house.
Who's going to fix their solar panels?
I don't know. So you wanted to talk about some solar panels.
Well, yeah. I'd like to talk about breakthroughs, but whenever there's a solar panel breakthrough or any sort of breakthrough, it's kind of vaporware, like it's not really talked about. But perovskite solar panels, which is a sort of been announced, and different people were working in the labs, and people like us, we read the blogs and we see these announcements, but this was like 10 years ago, and it looks like there's one company that claims it's bringing it to market now. And it's a different sort of approach where they can mix this, instead of just using silicone, which is fairly expensive, they're mixing this substance, I won't say it, starts with a P. Perovskite, into it, and it changes the mix. And I'm not an expert on it, but this is a significant breakthrough because they had this challenge of it breaking down in humidity. And what they did is they sandwiched it with a certain kind of lead, actually. But the lead actually goes away, apparently. Like they put a coating on the lead to make it to sort of neutralize it after a while. So it's coated in lead, and with battery breakthroughs and solar breakthroughs, there's always one thing that keeps it from going to market, whether it's the manufacturing difficulty, the price, or the temperature. It doesn't work in certain temperatures. So the deal is most solar panels now are 18, 19, 20, 21% efficiency. They take that potential from the sun, and there's always this theoretical level of like 28% or 30% or something. Well, they think that 40% is possible.
Wow.
And if you look at a solar farm and how much money you're putting into, I don't know, 50,000 panels, you've got how many on your roof?
I've got 31 panels.
31 panels. If you look at the sort of the footprint that it takes up becomes smaller. So the land purchase, the installation becomes smaller. It's lighter. It can be printed. So there's different uses for it. It can go into windows and building materials, and sort of expands it. But if you look at one of the things that they're talking about doing is just putting a little bit of perovskite in it and sort of having a hybrid panel, and that increases the efficiency a little bit, but then it brings down the cost because silicon is so expensive. So if you get these panels that are so cheap, you can just put twice as many of them up.
Right. And
the cost per megawatt or whatever you want to do, gigawatt or whatever it is, just becomes that much more cheap, and it's already cheap. And if this takes off, as we're all hoping it does, then you talked about the natural gas plant next door in Moose Jaw. Those things would be absurd.
Yeah.
My argument is that if the planet was on the line, we should overbuild solar.
Oh, totally. Yeah.
Overbuild it and angle right here. We could angle them for winter, which is almost straight up and down.
Mm-hmm.
The snow would not accumulate. You wouldn't have as much maintenance on it, and you would make it for the winter solstice for the ideal, and then you would waste a lot of energy, that potential.
Mm-hmm.
This is just my theory. I could be completely crazy. Solar people would just be rolling their eyes and punching the wall right now, but that's my theory. Anyway, Bruce, we do thank you for the call. And as far as the chargers going up, it's a point that I wanted to make was that it's actually pretty easy to put up chargers. I mean, we always thought that was a big roadblock in EV adoption, but look how fast they went up here. A year ago, we had nothing. We had maybe a charger at a dealership that nobody used or knew about. And now we've got Tesla chargers everywhere. We've got not Canadian Tire, Petro-Canada, and Canadian Tire's coming soon.
Yeah.
And the problem is in the States on long weekends and things, you can get too many people. I mean, there's so many EVs, so you have to keep on top of that.
Yeah, in places like California, they're running into road, overuse at some of them.
You really don't want that. It's not like a lineup at a gas station because somebody's charging for 30 minutes or longer. But yeah, so we've got the latest chargers here too, the V3.
Yeah, and so basically the Trans-Canada Highway is covered now from Tesla and Petro-Canada, I think. So
all the way to Bruce. So we could go see Bruce in the tip of Nova Scotia.
Fantastic. We could record an episode in his bomb shelter.
We may need to. It's probably less radioactive. We'll have to get Bruce to take a radon test of his shelter.
All right, there's a couple of news items I wanted to get to, so maybe let's look at the news. There's a report that came out that ride-sharing rides are actually creating 69% more pollution than the rides that they're replacing.
Why is that? Oh, because people are not... This is a concern that I've had, because you could be taking a subway, but no, you're going to take a ride share.
Yeah, Uber or Lyft. So in the short term, unfortunately, ride sharing has created a lot more pollution. In the long term, it should improve as the ride shares switch to electric. But yeah, the rides that they're replacing are often public transport or walking or bicycles. So unfortunately, we're seeing a spike in pollution and CO2 from ride sharing.
And this is a concern. I've only seen one mention of this, and it stuck with me. The idea is that robotaxis, autonomous driving will take over, and it won't be about your car being able to drive itself. It will be about robotaxis roaming the earth, and you can get one in 30 seconds, and there will be no need to own a car. My concern is that who would want to take the subway? Mm-hmm. If I was in Toronto and everybody was robotaxiing, and I could do it for next to nothing. I could probably do it for cheaper than the subway, based on 18 cents a mile that Elon says it'll be. Then why would I take the subway? And the billions of dollars put into subway and mass transit will be wasted and unused.
And we might end up with a continuation of the current problem, which is too many cars on the road and traffic problems.
Now, I have seen some studies that say that autonomous vehicles will actually not have the clogged arteries because they won't stop.
Yeah.
Because they don't, one person slows down and the whole freeway in LA is clogged for 5 kilometers or something, like it's a total traffic jam. The idea, but then we're a long ways away from that. We're probably at least 20 years away from sort of everybody using autonomous vehicles, I would imagine. But that's the idea, and that's the concern I have. Although I see electric buses are really taking off. I think we're at the tipping point of electric buses taking off. Because I've been following the electric bus makers, and every day it's like 200 here, 100 there, and 400 for Milan and Central America and South America buys them. I don't know why we're not, and that's going to displace a lot of oil right there. A lot of oil gets used for buses around the world, and that's going to change very quickly because already it's just about economics. It's not about the environment.
Oh, yeah, absolutely. And that's why people are going to buy electric buses, is they are cheaper in the long run.
Anything else you'd like to talk about this week, Brian?
Yeah, well, we've had a bunch of rail blockades here in Canada for the last month or so. There's been protests over a proposed pipeline that's been going through the Wet'suwet'en territory, the First Nation in...
It's a natural gas pipeline, right?
Natural gas pipeline that is scheduled to go through traditional Indigenous lands. And so there's been a month of quite tense protests here in Canada. But apparently they've come to some kind of a tentative agreement.
Oh.
So the details are not out yet, so we'll update that when they come in.
Yeah, so it's a natural gas pipeline that goes through territory in the mountains to reach tankers on the coast?
Something like that, yeah.
Okay.
But it's...
if you're not from Canada, pipelines are a big deal in our politics right here, right now, and it's just ugly.
And as we've discussed before, you have one going through basically your backyard.
I have multiple ones going through my backyard.
Multiple, really? Like literally?
Literally multiple pipelines. Like,
so there's sort of a field behind your house.
Right, which is but like if they made a freeway through there, it's just for the pipeline. And it's a grass field, and there's gophers and wildlife and sometimes antelope.
Mm-hmm.
And yeah, so it's just... and they dig it up every now and again to inspect it. So a few years ago, they dug it up, and we could see what it was.
Oh, wow.
And it was this massive pipe under there. But on the edge of the street, on the edge of the end of the block, they have a sign for every pipeline. One little sign in the ground that says, "Caution, pipeline, this one, call this number if it bleeds." So there's one for propane. There's my neighbor says there's one for some sort of gaseous pipe that is heavier than air. If it ever leaks, we'll never know about it till we blow up. He informed me of that.
Great.
And as well as other pipelines. So there's a ton of pipelines that go right through the city.
As there is through the whole country. We've got lots of pipelines. And
then there's a refinery that it goes past, which is about starts about 1.5 kilometers from me or something like that. Maybe 2 kilometers, and then there's rail that takes oil to and from that refinery. So yeah, and then I got helicopters flying overhead, so it's a hazardous place to live.
I don't know if you caught this, but there was a big fire at a refinery in L.A. Like there's an oil refinery that's right in Los Angeles.
Go on.
And caught on fire.
That's never a good thing.
It's never a good thing. No, it was a massive, massive fire. So,
and our refinery's on strike, so there's been concerns about safety, but I don't know if they're valid or not.
Here's what I remember about the refinery in our city. Like about 30 years ago, there was some type of gaseous emission from the refinery, and some debris kind of settled on everyone's houses and cars in the neighborhood.
Very good.
And so a lot of people, the paint on their cars started to peel away. Do you remember that?
No, I don't.
Yeah, so there was a big settlement, and if your car was one of the affected cars where, and you would see cars driving around our city with peeling paint, and you would know that they were from that neighborhood.
I did not know that.
You don't remember this? Yeah, so there was a settlement. You could get a check, basically, if your car was affected. They would pay for a paint job for your car.
The oil industry, I can't wait for it to be replaced by something better.
Yeah, and that's what we're here to watch.
We're watching as fans.
Okay, well, I guess that wraps it up for this week.
It does, and join us on the Clean Energy Show every Wednesday, hopefully, with good health and time available. And don't forget to contact us. We'd love to hear from you. See you next week.
All right.